The other thing is the psychologist who I'm quoting on this tips for raising firstborns is Dr. Kevin Lehman. He's studied birth order for almost 4 decades, and he wrote the book, The Birth Order Book, which I'm sure many people have heard of, subtitled Why You Are the Way You Are. One of the other things that he said that I thought were really rang true for me is help your child see the big picture. So firstborns tend to become so focused on perfecting the task at hand that they may not see anything else. And I think Danny would agree that this was true for him as a child. So Dr. Lehman says we should encourage our kids to understand that perfectionism is not always a strength, that you don't have to, at 8 years old, stay up till all hours of the night making the very best science fair project, because it's maybe more important to focus on learning about the solar system and actually enjoying the process. But I think I, as a parent, tried to help Danny do the absolute best every single time. And so then he felt that he had to do the absolute best at every project and rewrite the paper and get it, just have it be the best. And ultimately, I'm not sure that's doing him the biggest favor I could have done him. What do you think?
I said to Evan one time, I was panicking about, I can't even remember what it was, but it was something that I felt like I had learned better with Sasha, but I was panicking about how maybe I had messed it up with Anna. And he said, he reassured me. He was very sweet. He said, I'm sure it's fine. Didn't mess her up. She's just fine. And he said, but also, what were we supposed to do? How are we supposed to know? You don't know until you've done it. And whenever I start getting hard on myself about things that I maybe didn't do, quote unquote, right the first time, that maybe I'm doing a little better the second time, I really try to remember that I had no freaking idea what I was doing the first time. I was totally
and no
brand
parent
new.
does.
Yeah, it's true. And oh gosh, nothing has given me more empathy and compassion for my own parents than having children and thinking, it's like you spend your whole life, especially an oldest child, spent my whole life thinking that my parents know absolutely everything. And then I went through this thing that I think a lot of people do, where then I, like in my late teens, early 20s, it occurred to me that they are human. And that was at first so disappointing and upsetting that they were not the superheroes that I wanted and needed them to be. But then I accepted it and we grew closer and all that good stuff. But now parenting and thinking about gosh, they were just as clueless as I was. They were just trying their hardest to do as well by me as they possibly could. It's really given me a lot of grace for, or helped me to give them grace for anything that, maybe I looked back on as not being ideal. But gosh, it is.
Don't you have compassion for all parents? Like, even when you're out and about, now that we can sort of be out and about, like in the market, and somebody's just trying to manage 2 kids at the same time, don't you have enormous compassion for them?
Oh, absolutely. And, the things that I used to think, the judgmental thoughts that I used to have pre-kids about how, well, I'm never going to do X, Y, Z. And my children will only have, natural wooden toys, and they will never, ever make eye contact with any sort of screen. And all of these, and I'm not going to become, I'm going to still go out and do things and socialize and go drinking with my friends, because I'm not going to let, oh my gosh, the highfalutin, judgmental high horse thoughts that I had before I had children about how great I was going to do it all. And the way that has been met with reality has been a really rude awakening. So much.
It's humbling.
Oh, deeply, deeply humbling. Absolutely.
I went through this with my sister, who so many years older than me. I first moved out to California from Boston, where we grew up. And I remember being in her car and thinking, oh, this is disgusting. There are crumbs everywhere. I will never let my children eat in the car. Right. And there are plastic, brightly colored toys everywhere. Like you said, I'm going to get wooden toys. Sure. Right. And on and on and on. And we do the best we can. I think there's a real trade-off between the ignorance that first-time parents have, but the focus that they have on that child. So I think the child benefits from all that love and attention and focus and doesn't benefit from the inexperience, whereas the second children benefit from the experience. And I got to say, I think they also, to some degree, benefit from the lack of total obsessive focus.
Yeah,
I don't know that it's really a good thing, right?
Well, second and subsequent kids come into a world, in some ways, Sasha's world mirrors the real world so much more than Anna's did when she was born, because Sasha came into a world where there were other people with other needs, and she wasn't always going to be, the absolute first priority. And so she, it's interesting. She learned to self-soothe. She started self-soothing like right away. And it's not like we were ignoring her, not picking her up or anything, but she does this very, very cute thing where she puts one thumb in her ears and holds and sort of plays with her ear. And it's really cute. And she does it. As soon as, the slightest thing happens, thumb is in mouth, hand is on ear, and she's fine. And, Anna she's getting better at it as she's getting older, but she required 10 different kinds of soothing. And I think that this sort of self-reliance is probably going to serve Sasha really well in life, because she came into this world where she wasn't always going to be the only one getting attention. So interestingly, and I think that this is something that we take very much with a grain of salt, but one thing that has been found consistently in these studies is that firstborns tend to have higher IQs. And that's the researchers that I read were mostly attributing that to the amount of time their parents were able to spend with them. But I thought that was really interesting. And so there does tend to be, because of that and the tendencies to be leadership oriented, you see a lot of CEOs, a lot of various kinds of heads of businesses and organizations being firstborns.
Let's go back to Adler's birth order chart for just a minute and share what some of the qualities are of middle children, last children, and only children. I just think it's so fascinating, and I want to know if it resonates with you. So middle children, he says, tend to be flexible, easygoing, social, peacemakers, independent, secretive, may feel like life is unfair, generous, and strong negotiators. Would you say that that's been your observation generally about middle children?
Of middle children?
Yeah.
Yeah, to a certain extent. I'm curious if in a 2-kid household, if number 2 is going to be considered the last, or if maybe they're like a hybrid of last and middle.
Well, and I think it's funny because sometimes their birth order is only a temporary birth order, because they are last until, like my sister was last for 8 years. And then all of a sudden, poof, she suddenly became a middle child.
Right.
Last children, he describes as outgoing, creative, self-centered, risk takers, financially irresponsible. I object to that. Competitive. I see all of them as competitive. Bored easily, likes to be pampered, and a sense of humor.
Are you competitive? Do you think of yourself as competitive?
No, actually. Not really. I mean, I am in some ways, but more with myself than with other people.
Well, I'm curious for you.
I think for sure I'm a risk taker, or have been in the past. Outgoing, yeah. Creative, I like to think of myself as creative. Bored easily, no. Likes to be pampered, who doesn't? Sense of humor, I don't know. I'll let you be the judge of that.
You have a great sense of humor. So, well, you
Thank
are
you.
probably a little bit of a hybrid of last and only, right? Because even though you had two siblings, your upbringing for a lot of it functioned probably, I'm guessing, a little bit like an only child, right? From the time you were
Yes.
10.
My brother moved out when I was 5, so I
Oh
don't
my
even
God.
really remember living with him. My sister came and went a lot. She lived with us for part of the time when she was in college, so I do remember her being around all the time. But you're right. I think I have to say that when I look at the traits of the only child, some of those ring true as well.
And Fred is youngest also by a long stretch, right?
Exactly. So he would also be a cross between last and only. So you have things like under the only category, unforgiving, interesting, sensitive, private, demanding, dependable. Once again, leader and mature. So you get that in the firstborn, and then you get it again in the only. Self-control and close to parents in only. So super interesting. You know, I read something else that I thought was really fascinating about who is attracted to who. You know, we talk about who is your soulmate, and your soulmate is often someone who is your opposite. So firstborns often find their soulmate in middle or last or only
That is
children.
definitely my experience
But
as
then
far
the
as,
opposite of that is the twin flame,
tell
which
me what
are people.
that means.
So the twin flame is people, and I think Fred and I might fall into this category, who are attracted and drawn to people with whom they have a lot in common. So in Fred's and my case, we are both a cross between the last and only, because we were the last by such a long amount of time, and both creative, both flexible, I would say, in a lot of ways, outgoing, different in many, many ways. But the difference either can be good, is what this article was saying, that you can bond well and have a great long-term relationship with a twin flame or with a soulmate, but it does different things. When it's with a soulmate, you get to kind of work out different things from your childhood, because that person brings to the table or brings to the relationship things that you lacked, and it allows you to work out certain things. Whereas with the twin flame, you understand each other.
Yeah, I think I'm definitely in a soulmate relationship. I've always thought of Evan and me as having extremely compatible baggage, like the missing pieces of a matching baggage set for each other. I think that,
Like, what would be an example of that, Gabby?
well, for example, going back to, I don't know if this is going to come out after our fighting episode, but, we talked in our fighting episode about the respective ways that we were, the families that we came from in terms of conflict. And so the fact, while on one hand, I tend to get snappy about things that Evan doesn't get snappy about, the fact that he isn't argumentative and doesn't yell at me or loses patience really feels so good to, like, my inner baby child, a part of me that's afraid of getting in trouble. And in particular, I have such anxiety about breaking things, messing things up, spilling, that kind of thing. It's like my little perfectionist firstborn is so upset about, breaking a glass or things like that. And the amount of compassion and just the kindness he shows me and the extent to which he demonstrates, this is obviously a minor example, but the way that it's just not a big deal. I feel like that little